Welcome to another episode of Distilling the West. I'm your host, Dan, joined by my co host, Dave. And we have an extra special guest today, Dave Smith, head distiller and blender from St. George Spirits. How you doing there, Dave?
That's you.
That's you, buddy.
I'm doing that's me. I'm doing great. Really happy to spend some time with y'all. And yeah, just share a few stories, maybe sip on a couple of things and yeah, just talk some shop and enjoy some life together.
Yeah, we're super, super excited for you to be here on this lovely Saturday morning. I almost said afternoon. It's not quite afternoon yet. Dave, why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself?
This is like the portion where I got to talk about myself, and it's my least favorite part of talking in general. I'll talk your ear off. I'll fall into a couple of monologues here. I definitely invite you to stop me, talk over me, force. I would much rather have a dialogue. But my so as we've established already, my name is Dave Smith. I'm the head distiller and vice president of St. George Spirits. We're located in Alameda, California. It's a small island in the Bay Area, so right off the coast of Oakland. On a clear day, we look out from our retired 65,000 square foot old naval aircraft hangar across the bay and can see the entire San Francisco skyline, the Bay Bridge, Golden Gate. If it's a really nice, cold, clear day out there, the Marin Headlands out there. It's a place like no other, truly. And I came to St. George Spirits a whopping 21 years ago. So finally this year, I'm allowed to drink there. Really excited for that. Um, and I showed up as probably like employee number 4 or 5, and, before that, I had been working in the wine world a little bit, and I wanna be really clear about this. I was by no means a winemaker or remotely of that caliber or talent or training. I was just, lucky enough to do a couple of harvests in the wine world because my brother was an assistant winemaker, and he's got his own label, so Matt Smith has Blacksmith Cellars. At the time, he was the assistant winemaker working for Jeff Cohn at JC Cellars, but he was really working for Mike and Ann Dash at Dash Cellars. And so I was a harvest intern at Dash Cellars for a couple of harvests there in 2002 and 2004. And just got to learn about winemaking, got to see the process, kind of from start to finish at some level. This is speaking as a kid, freshly graduated out of college at that point. I had a thesis I had written as a creative writing major. So, I was definitely bound for infinite wealth and riches and a life of luxury. Um, but my brother had talked me into coming out there in 2002 as I graduated and said, "Hey, we can use some harvest interns. You're going to work really hard. You can help me with my own wine label on the side. So instead of working a 60-hour work week, we get to work 80-hour work weeks
Look
because
at
it's
that.
harvest. Grapes are coming in. Beer is never going to taste as good at any time in your life as after a really big, hard day of just hustling it. And I'll teach you how to drive a forklift. Maybe you can make a barrel of wine. And my brother had fallen in love with winemaking. That has been his passion for a long time. He sold his '66 Mustang to buy his first 2 French oak casks when he started his own wine label. I mean, like that's some love. That's some heart
Real
and right at
dedication.
the
Yeah.
outset. And so I got an opportunity to learn under some really talented people, including my brother and Mike and Ann are wonderfully talented. Ann is a French trained winemaker, and Mike's a California trained winemaker. So they had a really interesting perspective on old world and new world.
Mhm.
And they were also friends with the folks at St. George because everyone was in Alameda at that point. St. George was not in its 65,000 square foot retired aircraft hangar. It was in a 5,000 square foot space.
Okay.
And that was a bay that they rented from a winery called Rosenblum Cellars. And the Dashes rented space from Rosenblum and JC Cellars and Sunset Cellars and yada, yada, yada. Everyone rented some space from Rosenblum because they were a very, very, really, really big Zen house
Okay.
and doing some fun work. And so my brother was telling me like, "Oh man, you got to go meet, Lance and Jorg. They're these great people. When they get raspberries in, like the whole place just smells like jam. It's amazing, and they're really good folks. They get pears in, and like it's just like it's the same, but it's different from what we're doing. And then they're distilling it. And at that point, kind of going back to my earlier comment, it's like as a kid showing up, this is all magic. Like
Yeah.
I had some vague thoughts about like I wonder what it's like to be a perfume maker. Like I wonder what it's like to like be a professional nose or like search out characteristics or think in that space. And I had a chance to just kind of get a sense of things. And my brother had, at that point was like, I think Jorg and Lance, this is fast forwarding a little bit. I did it, was a teacher in the interim and then came back and did another harvest internship and was thinking about using the wine world to just travel. So you work hard for 3 months, then you travel for a couple months, hop the hemisphere, work hard for a couple months, travel for a couple months. Figured I would travel and write and just kind of, live some life and enjoy it. And at one point, Mike Dash is kind of like, Dave, you got like a really kind of fucked up, dark, twisted sense of humor. Do you know Lance over at St. George? I think you guys would get along famously. And so, and so I'm saying, gee, mister, I don't know. I don't know Lance really. I know who, know of him. Um, but St. George had been established in 1982 by its founder, York Roof.
Mhm.
And St. George was founded as an eau de vie house. And in that process, York had developed the distillery over the 80s and 90s. He had Bill Manshart, who had come in, and Bill's a fascinating story in his own right of multiple retirements. He's one of those guys who, like, if there's a zombie apocalypse, you want Bill in your camp because he was in the Navy and retired from that. And he worked for the phone company, retired from that. And then he worked with York for years. And like, we still have ladders at the distillery that Bill built by hand out of wood that work for a climate, climate
Yeah,
in and out of tanks and things like that. Like,
that's
you
awesome.
can buy a ladder, he built them and they still last, 30 years later.
Yeah.
Um, so the Bill's at a place where he was retiring in the mid 90s, about 1996. And Lance showed up. And I can talk more about Lance there. But the just kind of the essence I wanted to share is that the distillery at its inception is an eau de vie house. It develops into more than that. It develops into a single malt whiskey house over
Mhm.
time in the 90s with Lance showing up and what his real passion and process was in that evolution. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, flavored vodkas were a big deal. And St. George had a small brand called Hair One. Eventually, it was sold off to Proximo Spirits. It allowed Dirk to retire. It allowed Lance to become master distiller at that point and owner of the business. And the big piece there is simply that Hanger One's around. They needed some help, so like they needed to hire someone. They needed another guy to work on the floor.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my break. That was my chance to come in and get a taste of it. And I thought I would do that for a year, to learn what I can. And I was vaguely dangerous with a forklift and some cellar sciences and pumps and hoses and tanks and no idea how to distill. And I said, if I'm here, like, I don't know how long I'll stay, but if I'm here, I really want to learn everything I can.
Yep.
And I thought I would do it for a year. And my brother had said, they offer you a job, man. You just say yes. They're good people. And I'm like, I walk out of the interview and I was like, I don't think I even know what I'm making. So, but like, forgot to ask that question. Um, but I thought I'd do it for a year, and it's 21 years later now because I've had extraordinary opportunity. I've had an amazing amount of mentorship and love and friendship, and it's really, I'm really close to my family that I was born with, but there's also the family that you choose in this
Yeah.
life, and I can't imagine my life in any other way without that mentorship and love and found family that I enjoy at St. George.
That's awesome.
That sounds like a really rich experience, yeah, and, um, well, what we have in the glass right now is kind of an ode to that, an eau de vie, uh, and, you wanna introduce this first pour we have for today, Dave?
Absolutely. So eau de vie, show of hands. Hey, oh my gosh, let's do it. Let's both do it. Ooh,
There we go.
it's like us. So eau de vie is a fanciful term for an unaged fruit brandy. And we'll taste a couple of other spirits today, but it's really important to me that you understand this eau de vie because this is what set St. George in motion. When York founded the distillery, he had history in Germany, in the brewing world. If you go to Freiburg, Germany today, his the brewery just outside the center of town is still run by his cousin.
Oh, wow.
Jorg had done his first distillation with plums from a tree in the family's backyard when he was 13 at the local blacksmith shop. Take a beat with that and think about what that life and world was like, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And um, when Jorg came to America, he came in the late 70s, and he's sort of bearing witness to the explosion of California wine on the international scene, and the like a world of post Judgment of Paris California wine is meaningful and worthwhile. And he's looking around and seeing this shift in culture and change and recognizing that the bountiful harvest of California, no one's touching apples or pears or raspberries, cherries.
Yeah.
He's goofing around with different fruits. No one knows this. No one knows what a kiwi is. Turns out it doesn't make a great eau de vie, but York's goofing around with that, and he's kind of perfecting his craft. And so he started, by I believe it was 1991, he was winning, you know, prestigious awards, back in the old world and selling 90% of St. George spirits were going back to the old world.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was sort of that same sense of like, who is this? Wait, California doesn't make eau de vie. It can't be that good. Who is this? Oh, it's a German. Okay, no wonder. Okay, it's kind of like it's American, but it's not really American. I
Yeah.
guess that's okay then.
Right.
And so what I want you to understand is that, as you talk to any distiller, we can talk technical details, we can talk recipes, we can talk all of the nooks and crannies of how to make something. But I think the why is really important.
Hmm.
And I think the point of view of the distiller is really important to that. And as a point of view, St. George Spirits, we're eau de vie distillers first and foremost. And a pear brandy, that unaged fruit brandy, there's no barrels to massage out a flaw. There's no time. There's no opportunity to course correct something. All you do is capture the sensory snapshot of the harvest.
Yeah.
And you can do different batches. You can, possibly you can do different batches. There'll be variations, certainly from year to year. I mean, if I buy a bottle of wine that's a 2018 and a 2019, and it's from the exact same winemaker, same grape varietal, same vineyard designate, I expect it to be different. If it's not different, then basically they're not really capturing the details of the terroir and it's just grape juice.
Right.
And so as a spirits maker, you don't necessarily have that luxury. And so like that 750 ml bottle of Pear Eau de Vie that you have there, that is probably that's probably about 7 different batches of pear brandy from probably 3 to 4 harvest seasons. And we're constantly making more than we need every year. We're balancing each piece of that. We're trying to make sure that that thumbprint is truly evocative of what the harvest is. That bottle represents approximately 30 pounds of fresh pears. If I want to make alcohol, man, there's so many better ways to make alcohol than pears. Pears, not all the sugars are fermentable. You can't, not all the sugars aren't all fermentable. So we mash up the pears. You probably have something that it's maybe five, we're really lucky, 5.5% on a good year. But it's like, looks like applesauce, but it's all mashed pears. We're using skins, all of it. Mash that. We'll do a cold fermentation of the strain of champagne yeast. So it's really expressive, really focuses in on the characteristics that are there of the pear itself. It doesn't really have any of its own contribution of other aromatics that yeast strains can share. And we'll do a fermentation that can last anywhere from about 4 to 8 days, and then we'll distill on our pot stills. Our smallest pot still is a 250 liter still. Our largest is 1,500 liters. And they're all from Arnold Holstein, which is in the Markdorf region, so Lake Constance region of Germany. So that's Swiss, German, Austrian border. You can jump into more on that, whatever you want. The thing that I love about this pear brandy, though, is that when we bring pears into the shop, we let them ripen in bin. So again, it's this old retired aircraft hangar. You got this Jules Verne, Willy Wonka kind of vibe with these still pots in there, and you got tanks and barrels and all of it. And we bring in these, if you've ever seen in the wine world, you see these half-ton bins. So these like white bins that hold fruit. We've got, we'll have anywhere from between like 40 and 72,000 pounds of pears on the floor at any one time during harvest.
Wow.
And all the work we do has to happen in the harvest season. Like you can put pears in cold storage, but we've all had a pear that's like this beautifully, like it looks perfect. It's like February or March. It's that gift pear, that gift box of pears. They're individually wrapped. It looks beautiful. And you bite into it and it's like mealy and the flesh is kind of like weird and different. Like it sounds weird. I promise you that texture shows up in the brandy. Like if we're really capturing the nuances and details,
Yeah.
we have to do all of this work really in the heart of the harvest. So like harvest this year is going to start basically last week of July, early August, probably
Mhm.
in California. So mountain pears in California, and they will be, and it'll probably go into September, maybe October. So like there's some cold storage in there. Like we can be working with them into October, but at a certain point, like it's just like the quality isn't going to be there anymore. And if we're not capturing something that's absolute and utter perfection, don't bother.
Yeah.
And at St. George, I mean, the smallest pear harvest I've ever seen in my lifetime here has been 40,000 pounds.
Wow.
Largest harvest is about 550,000
Oh, wow.
pounds.
My
So it
gosh.
depends on, we're looking at quality, we're looking at our needs, we're looking at, just what's out there, and making those decisions to make sure that if we can't make this is going to sound kind of weird, but like, we're distiller owned and operated. If we like, it's kind of like that thing of like, if I can't, if I can't play with my toy, then no one gets to play with my toy. We can't make the spirit that we really are passionate about, that we want to put on the table for our own friends and family.
Mhm.
Why fucking bother?
Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of noise out there. We don't need to contribute to that noise. If it's not up to our standard for us, then I would rather not put it out into the world.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the crux of everything we do. As I bring this all back to that pair brandy, what I want you all to understand is that this is our point of view. So if I'm capturing this unaged evocative expression of the raw material in a pear brandy, then when we go to single malt whiskey or we go to gin or vodka or liqueurs, anything else, it's the point of view of an eau de vie maker. And I hope that that comes through in everything that we do, that it's really, it's recognizable. You could taste it and be like, holy shit, I hate this. This is the worst thing I've ever had. This is totally those idiots, Lance and Dave. This is that crew at St. George. This is definitely there. I don't love the comment, but it's like, it's better than hearing like, man, this is so great. It's just like this other thing that I love.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like we're supposed to make things that are unique to us and our expression, our own arts. That's our job. So that's really, really important to us. I mean, we hold fast to it.
Yeah, it strikes me in the glass, that really clean and crisp, approach to it. It feels very refined. And before you said it, I was gonna say that I really get that across the whole product lineup for sure. Um, and it's bright yet
Mhm.
like a nice dryness to it, and you get that just yeah, really pure pear essence in the glass. I think this is artfully done for sure.
And so you said
Super kind. Thank you.
you're blending up to 7 different harvests roughly per
Yeah.
batch?
It depends on the batch, so that will vary from, that could it could be more, it could be fewer, and to be very clear here, I believe I said, 3 to 4 harvests,
Okay.
and again, that will vary, but at any time as we do each fermentation cycle, so you bring in, 16 ton, our fermenters for pears are, we got a 16-ton tank and a 20-ton tank, so 4,000 pounds and 4,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons, respectively. So each of those fermentations will be distilled separately, stored separately, and then we will, over time, evaluate all of the distillates as separate items, and then start to build up a blend for what that is. I don't
Gotcha.
want to just toss it all in the same tank and be like, "Good, Bob's your uncle. Let's roll."
Yeah.
There's truly some nuance and variation. Like it develops the pears at the very beginning of the season, where do they come from in that orchard? Is it a different orchard? Is it a different grower? Like it's, you're kind of working through it. And these are all Bartlett pears, which are by far my favorite pear, the best pear for pear brandy. And they're beautiful. The pears in all of this really primarily are all Lake County, California pears. Those are considered mountain grown. They're not valley grown pears. We talk about terroir in the wine world. You
Mm.
recognize that the microclimate and soil conditions and all of that is meaningful in wine and grapes. We recognize that idea in coffee as well. You talk about a Jamaican Blue Mountain and a Kona coffee and a Ethiopian Harar versus a Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. Makes sense in the coffee world without using the term terroir. No one ever talks about pears. No one ever talks about oranges or apples or anything like
Yeah.
that. But the terroir exists. It's part of the landscape that you're trying to capture, and it's really important to what we do.
And you guys have some, I hate to say spin-off products, but is that right that you use this base for like your spiced pear product?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we make a spiced pear liqueur,
Mm.
and that spiced pear liqueur, just pretty much imagine this along with pear juice, some organic cane sugar. We've got whole stick Saigon cinnamon. Saigon cinnamon, and again, this is, I'm going to go back to the here's here I am on my soapbox is a broken record. Cinnamon. Oh yeah, there's terroir in that too. We don't use the term terroir, but absolutely, it's a meaningful term. And Saigon cinnamon has this really lovely dusty sweetness to it,
Okay.
high oil content. So that Saigon cinnamon and clove, along with some sugar, pear juice, pear brandy. It's at a lower ABV instead of 40, instead of an 80 proof, 40% in the bottle on an eau de vie. It's at 20%, so half that strength. And then, and this is really important, we're trying to capture and like reconstruct that sort of like the brightness and the sweetness in that experience of like a fresh pear, like a tartlet. Like, I want you to think about, baking over the holidays.
Yeah.
Um, and so we also use some malic acid and some citric acid. And with that pear juice and the sugar, and you've got the spices and the pear brandy to really kind of provide that elegance to it and lift everything. And what you have is something where that acid is a really important interplay
Mm.
so that it's not just sweetness.
Yeah.
It's not a liqueur that becomes syrupy or flat. I want to use as little sugar as possible. It's got to have enough sugar that it is effectively can work in a cocktail,
Mhm.
but it also needs to live and breathe neat in a glass, just like we're tasting it right now. And
Yeah.
if it can't do that, it shouldn't be out in the world. And you need to have that balancing act. Part of what we love about fruit isn't sugar. It's the sour. It's that balancing act. That's
Yeah.
what makes it so expressive and enjoyable. And so doing making sure that we honor that in a liqueur, I think is really important.
Yeah. Now, what are some of your favorite cocktails with this? I mean, of course, it's certainly very enjoyable, neat in the glass here, and I love the mouthfeel. Like you can kind of just really get that silkiness. There's some great legs on the glass, but do you have any favorite cocktails you use this in?
I do. I can give you sort of two versions of the same cocktail. Um, and I would love to give you more cocktails for this, but realistically, once you have this cocktail, it's all you need.
Yeah.
So the first time I made this cocktail, I was with a friend. It was in Arizona. It was summertime. My wife has a lot of family in Arizona,
Okay.
so I just tacked on a work trip to it, and was out in the market, and it's probably punching out at 110, 115. Like it's that hot outside where like when you open the dryer door and you kind of like suffocate a little bit.
Yeah.
It's that feeling. And we finished our day, and we sit down at a bar, and I'm looking at it, and both of us are thinking like daiquiri. Like I want a like agricole rum daiquiri.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this bar that we happened to be at is great, but they didn't have any agricole rums that either of us were all that excited by, and there's not a bad daiquiri out there. But it was just sort of a moment of like, I saw the pear brandy and I looked at my friend, Garrett, and I'm like, I got a weird idea. But what if we do pear brandy? It's like, I was just thinking the same thing. And so you kind of do your basic daiquiri spec,
Okay.
call it 2 ounces of pear brandy,
Mhm.
maybe 3/4 ounce fresh lime juice, maybe half ounce of simple syrup. Everyone has their own kind of vibe on it, but you shake that up and you pour that up, and I promise you, the I will tell. Well, I promise. I think I know what you're gonna feel, but I'll tell you what I felt in that first moment. So Garrett and I, we ordered one of it, and it was just sort of a like, I wonder if this is gonna work. And he picked up the glass, breathed in, and took a sip, and my immediate reaction was, "Oh, I'm gonna order another one of these." It was like immediate, like, "Oh, one will not be enough, my friend." Just really beautiful, really relevant. It helps to, again, going back to that idea of just as I talked about the spice pear liqueur,
Mhm.
and that's got sort of this great baking and holidays and that vibe to it. Let's go back to that idea of like pear. And this pear brandy it's floral, it's steely, there's some tropical notes. It can be a little bit creamy. There's all these subjective characteristics that we could apply to how we describe the aromatics and the palate in the brandy itself. But it is bone dry. There's no sugar, there's no acid, there is nothing else. This is purely all pear. So when you then add some acid back into it with
Mm.
that lime juice, when you add some sugar back into it with sugar, suddenly you've got this thing that is really expressive. It's delightful. It's really easy and enjoyable to drink. The only other riff that I've really done on it is then tried to do like a split base where it's like half pear brandy, half agricole rum. Or I think my favorite at this point is pear brandy, do the exact recipe that I talked about, and then do like a bar spoon of agricole rum over the top.
Yeah.
It can both aged and unaged, but man, it's like I haven't had a bad version of it yet. It hits in all the right ways.
Duly noted.
We got our summertime
Is
drink.
that is that an can we do the entire podcast just me espousing how great the drink is? Can I can I just run out the clock on that?
We 100%. We can do that. We can do that.
No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, certainly craftsmanship in the bottle and the glass here. I'm really appreciating the cleanness, the refinement of it for sure. You guys have put some, because like you see a clear spirit in the glass, and for someone who maybe a little bit more age spirit focused, they think, oh, you just mash some stuff, you throw it in the still, and you get out and you slap it in a bottle, and that is anything besides what's going on here, for sure.
I want to no, I think it's a really great observation, and I want to give you a sense of Jorg as the founder of the company, and he's the maestro. When Lance showed up at St. George Spirits in 1996, Lance brought Jorg his homemade bottle of whiskey. Lance had been a nuclear engineer in the U.S. enterprise. He made the natural transition that most Navy guys do into becoming a brewer at that point. Fell in love with a bottle of Lagavulin that a friend had given him as a gift, and realized after going to a library and looking up a book, he had found something. Basically, realized that he's like, I'm doing half the work of being a distiller by being a brewer.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I wonder, and he's at the that's the heart of the craft beer movement in the mid '90s there
Hmm.
in the Bay Area. Like, it's like, wow, what can you do? Like, what can I express here? He's making whiskey in his garage for a couple of years. Has heard about Jorg by reputation, and again, Jorg is no like there was a time like we've got a letter from Julia Child, Jorg had written to in like the '80s, where she had said, I really love this work you're doing and believe that you should carry forward with it. It's
That's awesome.
exciting. Like it's very sweet, it's very endearing, and it's something where this is a guy who's just trying to figure it out, and he's in a space where he's making brandy not because there's double digit growth in the craft spirits industry. There is no craft spirits industry.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
no one is really touching the space. He's really looking at it as something to grow and to help others. And so Jorg's reaching out to and having people reach out to him, and he's voluntarily helping to get other distilleries started and give them some know-how. And so there's a piece here where when Lance shows up, Lance is excited and gives this master distiller his bottle of homemade whiskey. And Jorg smells it and tastes it and says, it's inoffensive. and, and I love Jorg to death. He's a super lovely human being. My kids call him Opa, but is like he's the maestro. He has no patience for anything that's not perfect. It's either perfect or other. There's no gray area here. And when Lance showed up, he was starting to he was, nosing through barrels and saying, Jorg, what is this? Oh, that's some shit pear brandy. It didn't go well. And it's like, well, it's spent 10 years in French oak right now. Like it's actually pretty stunningly good at this point. What your was like what your throwaway brandy was is pretty spot on. This is there's some apple brandy. Like one of the early projects when I first got there was sort of like, oh, it's a 20-year-old barrel of pear brandy. It's here's some French oak apple brandy from small farm. Like here's these concepts where these are things for Jorg that was purgatory. Like it wasn't good enough to be expressive and perfect unaged in a bottle. So it went to purgatory. It went to a barrel.
Mm.
And it took time for us to really recognize and understand and develop the idea of actually barrels being a secondary place where it's not just sort of a holding tank.
Yeah.
It's actually something where like you can take this further. You can help to develop what's there. We can be really intentional about that process, um, rather than just sort of like sticking the spirit and time out. So I think it's an important aspect to it, and just I think the sense of the distillery, sort of that at founding the ethos of just sort of it's either it's either excellent or it's no.
Yeah. Wow. I love your storytelling, Dave.
Yes.
You are a master of that for sure. Um, would you care
It's
to?
Mr. Storyteller to you, buddy, or the master. I'm a master of nothing.
You're like a master bullshitter here. Anything but that. You're carrying through on what's in the bottle for sure. Speaking of which, how about we get into our second pour here? You want to introduce your gin here?
So this is our Valley Gin. I apologize for the not so special effects happening, but Valley Gin. Um, so as I said, St. George Spirits, we were founded in 1982. This is our 44th year in operation, and a lot of people would would when they hear St. George Spirits, they don't necessarily know us as an eau de vie house. They might not even know us as a 30 years of whiskey history, of single malt history. They know us for gin. Our flagship gin is our terroir gin.
Mhm.
And the terroir gin is a walk in the woods in Northern California. And I can tell you more, as much about that as you'd like. But I really wanted to share the Valley Gin, which is we haven't released a gin domestically since really the initial lineup came out, I don't
Okay.
know, 13 years ago, something like that. And we don't just I don't want to make line extensions. I don't want to throw spaghetti against the wall. It's really got to have some meaning. And Valley Gin came about in a really uh, a beautiful way and an unfortunate way, because we worked with a family of specialty citrus growers in Southern
Mhm.
California for longer than I've been at St. George. I would say it's about 3 decades, give or take. And I'm going to mess up my years here,
It's all right. We
but
won't.
in 2023, the patriarch of that family, John Kirkpatrick, passed away. And Lance and I were kindly invited to his celebration of life to go visit. I was at the family's farm. This is a farm outside of Visalia, so south of Fresno, Central Valley, getting towards the Sierras.
Mhm.
And these guys are especially citrus growers. They make all kinds of or they grow all kinds of beautiful citrus. They taught me about citrus. And it's a spring day. There's probably 100 plus people in this farm on a hillside, and looking at the Sierras and these orange groves, and the orange groves are in blossom. And we worked with blossoms from these guys, from these folks in the past, but it's a beautiful day. John Bragchick is an amazing human being. If you ever have the chance, look up Lynn Cove Ranch. Everyone out there in this on this internet, go ahead and look up Lynn Cove Ranch. They've got this fun little this website, but you'll see some pictures on there, and there's these old pictures of what are like called the sun kissed babies, of kids with like this with fruit, and they're black and whites, and the picture's been sort of colored. And John's one of the old sun kissed babies. Like there's pictures of him from that era. Like he helped and worked with water rights for farmers in the Central Valley in that area. Like this is a really an amazing human being and a contributor to his community. And they invited Lance and I to come down there, and we were, of course, going to bring some spirits to share with everyone. And we showed up and realized that there was sort of an open bar situation, and that they had pressed a bunch of grapefruit juice, 6 hours
Mhm.
before, and would have that as a mixer. And they've got some other things, but I think with hospitality experience, you sort of go into a gear of like, oh, this is who I am today. Like this is my job. This is my way to contribute to this. Is to actually like I'm gonna hop behind the bar and take care of everyone, because this is how I can help. This is what I can. I want to do something. And so we did ran the bar, had this amazing day celebrating John's life. And by the end of the day, you're sitting on this hillside and you're breathing in the air, and you've got that feeling after you guys done time, I'm sure, like work at a restaurant, or
Mhm.
retail even will do it to you. But like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, like you're exhausted, but
Mhm.
you're also like vibrating. Like you can't just like go to sleep. Like you're still just like you're fired up. And so you're just breathing the air, sitting on the hillside, breathing in these blossoms, and just enjoying the experience and feeling the warm sunshine. And it was kind of that day that Lance and I were saying, I think this is something to capture.
Yeah.
If as a distiller, we are literally trying to take a moment of time, a sense memory for us,
Yeah.
and you're trying to put that message in a bottle. And it was kind of this feels important. And so we started to dissect and consider like what's meaningful to us about this, and how could we play the idea of orange blossoms and gin. We had done some work in that in the past on some projects, but it was something we really wanted to make sure that this was, there's collaborative projects, and there's projects where it's just like this is what I want for my table. And so Valley Gin came about with 25 botanicals. If we talk about Pear Brandy, it's about capturing that individual botanical, and there's different distillations, and we've got this blending process, but ultimately it's this very singular expression
Mhm.
and concept of what the harvest was. But if you're making a gin, that's an act of composition. Like you need to understand all of these individual botanicals, and then we're literally trying to paint a landscape. And so each of those botanicals are a different color for us. And we're trying to sort of capture that tonality and that vibrancy and all of what we love about that moment in time for ourselves. And there's some things that we can use there that are meaningful and come from the farm. And there's other things that we're going to have to sort of sidestep and not use something from the farm, but we're trying to get a particular vibration, a sense of character, a concept. Juniper is at the heart of gin, and then and I want to make sure there's lots of juniper here, but then sort of a Venn diagram of like working out from those each of these components and how you're sort of weighting that. And again, I'm going to go back to that idea of like, as I said with the Pear Eau where it's like the gin, this is at 90 proof. This needs to be neat in a glass,
Yeah.
iconically its own. It's got to be intentional. And then when you dilute it down with ice or you add tonic to it or is in a martini, like it needs to actually be able to speak and work in those spaces. It can't just get like washed out.
Yeah.
Like that's not, we're going to enjoy this gin neat in a glass. Very few people out in the world are ever going to really have that experience. No one else is looking for that.
Yeah.
So it's important to us that it has that ability to work in both spaces. And again, that goes back to being an eau de vie distiller because as an eau de vie distiller, wasn't about cocktails. It was a digestive after a dinner. It was
Mhm.
something you sipped on. And so with the gin as this active composition, we started out with juniper, and then we start working out these sort of concepts. And obviously, the big one here is orange blossoms. So Valencia orange blossoms, they come from the Kirkpatrick farm. It takes one person about an hour to harvest a pound of orange blossoms. That needs to happen in the morning when it's dark, before the bees come out, when it's still cold. Um, we harvested this year about 650 pounds of orange blossoms
Wow.
with the Kirkpatricks. That happens over the course of about a week to 2 weeks.
Hmm.
As soon as they're harvested, you're really fighting oxidation, and it's perfume making at that point. It's not
Yeah.
fermentation sciences. You're hustling to get them into the distill from the farm to the distillery. We're working with infusions and then distillations. And that sort of becomes like our map for the gin. So I've got juniper at the center. I've got this sort of
Okay.
broad map of that blossom as part of it. And I start just building up in layers. And a way to I would describe this is sort of like if I use that blossom, if I have too much blossom in here, then suddenly like it can get soapy. I
Okay.
don't want this to be soapy because that's a sort of an association we have with like lavender or orange
Mhm.
blossom or things out, like rose geranium. Like they can start to take us towards these sense memories, these associations we have. And so instead, what we do is we start to take an idea of like, okay, here's my roadmap of an orange blossom. And then adding more blossoms, not the solution, but can I do to like shade in the structure of those petals? Well, there's no cucumbers growing on that farm, but we can make fresh cucumber distillate. And now that fresh cucumber distillate gives you that softness in the palate and it allows us to sort of shade in that sense of the blossom and that what we would perceive as being there. And then I need a touch of green and a little bit of lush brightness because it's not just blossoms, it's leaves and it's just sort of it's a springtime and it's like, well, fresh dill has a touch of that citrus quality to it already. And now I can get that light outline and start to just basically shade in the structure and work outside of that. We can use some pink peppercorn and some nutmeg to sort of help to create the stamen of the blossom. And then we start to work out with, of course, citrus peel and fresh ginger. And I can go through all 25 ingredients autobiographically if you would like. But I want you to have a sense of like, it's sort of like it's about trying to capture not just the truth with a capital T of that moment in time in this orange grove, but it's also trying to use all of your craftsmanship and your sort of heart to sort of give a sense memory to someone else of what you really enjoyed. And you maybe had never been in an orange grove. You might never have spent time in that place. So I want to share that with you in some way where you can sort of recognize it and it feels true. It like if we make a spirit and it's meaningful for a year, I should do something else.
Yeah.
Our entire kind of concept and the kind of the beauty of spirits, there's something eternal about that. You make something and you put it in a bottle and it will outlive me. Why would I make something for next year? What I want to make is something that's a new classic for others 10 and 50 years down the road. Something that's, and it should be, you can't replace it. You cannot replicate it. It needs to really speak of us and what we love. Um, So Valley Gin was, really an act of inspiration. If you look at in fact, if you, my friends, if you look at the bottle, um, in that upper corner, sorry guys,
Yeah. Yeah.
upper corner on the tree there, you will see that there is a small epitaph for John Kirkpatrick in that upper right corner.
That's cool. Yeah,
And every bottle, just about every bottle we have has probably some Easter eggs hidden on it. There are things that are
that's cool.
important to us, things that maybe no one else will notice or care about. But yeah, it's part of who we are. Some of these things are things that are fun for us and kind of silly and just us being goofballs. And other things are, especially given just the weight of what this gin meant to us, something that's also sort of, necessary to put on the bottle. It felt right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just now coming back into my body, Dave. I was transported there for a moment. That was a beautiful story, Dave. Um, yeah, there's so much going on here in the glass. I really appreciate the complexity of it, but I maybe it is that cucumber distillate that you were talking about and kind of softening it all out. I really appreciate that with this gin, because sometimes, I'm not a huge gin drinker, but a lot of times you get into kind of some more of those like astringent flavors and the bite from the juniper. This is just so artfully done. It's very enjoyable. And, I have a bunch of citrus trees out on my little half acre, and I just absolutely love that floral aspect from those blossoms. And I really get it here. It kind of, it doesn't start out that way. I get more of that juniper and maybe some of those like caraway kind of coming in, but then it really transfers into that lovely floralness coming in, and I just love the softness of it. It's great. It is like a citrus grove.
Yeah, it really is. And again, we talked earlier, I'm from Florida. There's citrus everywhere. This kind of definitely get that sense of home in this.
I will say that I've got some sense memories of Florida and citrus groves in Florida as well, and it's part of what is, it's a counterpoint as you're sort of working on something like this. Of, you've got those childhood sense memories, at least for me, and I have very specific memories of like what that was like, and there's an aspect to that you sort of bring to the table here. The other comment I'd wanna make, and just as you taste this, and, this makes just a gorgeous gin and tonic. You make a gin and tonic with it,
Mhm.
and you guys don't like it, call me up, let me know, I'll drive up to Chico and come drink it for you. I got your back.
All right, we like to do that anyway. Mac us across the face. That's the kind version of that.
Um, but what I wanted to share there is, I think you guys there's a piece here that is important to me because, if I go back in time, like I'm a creative writing major, so
Mhm.
I wrote some screenplays. I can write some short stories about living on my buddy's couch and being unemployed as well. And I can share a sense of that time. One of my favorite ideas is that any art, again, you love it, you hate it, you've got a reaction to it.
Right.
But if I think about a winemaker, the really good ones, they're artists.
Mhm.
Brewers, oh yeah, those guys are art. Those guys and women, they're artists. You should have something of the art, and that aspect of what their craft is and what they put into to the experience that someone else takes away. And the most important part about that for me is that if you smell and taste this gin, and then you go back to it, you smell and taste it again, and then you have it in gin and tonic, and then you have it in a martini, and then you go back and you taste that gin again. Every time you go back to it, it should actually give you something a little bit more. It should evolve. Think about your favorite books. Think about a poem that you love. Think about a painting. Think about a movie. And like, there's movies out there that you see at one point in your life when you're 15 and you're like, man, that was really like, that was awesome. And then you see it again when you're, 26 and you're like, wow, like I experienced this on a completely
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
level. There was more there than I ever recognized, and now I'm a different person and I'm able to experience on a different level. I really believe that about spirits, and they should have that ability to give you more every time you go back to it. That's my definition of art. Like that's where it really is meaningful and worth something, is that ability to evolve at every time you encounter it.
Yeah.
That's yeah. So obviously you are well versed at and very good at telling stories, verbally and in the bottle. Is there? This is a fantastic moving story that you told about this one. Is there another bottle in your portfolio that tells a story that you were able to craft and bring that same sense of emotion to in a bottle?
Um, yeah, without sounding like a complete asshole, I just want to sound like a 50% asshole. I would say almost everything we make is akin to that. Um, we have, you know, we make a lot of spirits,
Mhm.
and if I want to step back and put my business hat on, we should not make all the spirits we make. Like that's pretty dumb, guys. That's not how you run a business. Lance will tell you that God loves drunks and fools, so we get double lucky on this. And um, we are everything we make has a reason for it. It has purpose. It has some meaning to us. I could tell you about the terroir gin and the stories that inspired that for Lance. Distilled Christmas trees over the years. We didn't make any gin at the time because Lance felt like, well, you make a gin, it's a lemon dry style gin. Why would we bother doing that? Like, I don't. He's got a great way to describe it. He's kind of like, you know what? A lot of people make a London dry style gin, and it's made in this hometown. It'll probably sell because it's locally made,
Mhm.
and that's cool. It's valuable, but it's not excellent. It's not necessarily excellence. It doesn't carry far afield. And if you make something, if the way he describes it is kind of like, I can go to a convention of Elvis impersonators, and there's some awesome impersonators, but they're not the king.
Right.
Like you are, like if your best work is just imitation, why be bothering?
Mhm.
And then he started to lean into this idea of, well, what if it's not London dry style? What if we go back in time and we developed gin from scratch based on the Bay Area and the flora of the Bay Area? And what's here? Let's go hiking. And he's got these sense memories and time where he picked up his son Franklin when Franklin was 6 or 7. I want to say this is about 2007, give or take. And he's picking up his son Franklin in the Oakland Hills. There's redwoods and there's Douglas fir and there's wild juniper and fennel growing. And there's that. If you ever go for a hike in Northern California and you're in the sun, you're on a dusty sun-baked trail. I'm gonna tell you two stories. You guys asked for one. I'm gonna give you two.
Yes.
This is one. I wasn't going for this, but there's that time when you're on that dusty sun-baked trail, but there's that tree line is off to, it's 10, 20 feet away,
Mhm.
and you can feel how the air's cool
Uh,
over there, but the sun's baking down on you right now, and there's that dusty sun-baked trail. And so the terroir gin really is that idea of like, this is like a martini in the woods. This is a walk in the woods in Northern California. A lot of people, and our VP of sales at the time, amazing, lovely human being, but we're just launching the gins, and we'd come up with these 3 gin concepts, and there was the dry rye, which is a rye whiskey-based gin, so real big and bold and intense. And there's, the Botanivore, which is our botanical leader, and, these all come up after the fact. Terroir is really the first inspiration of gin that we have. And Botanivore is really like a meadow in bloom. It's sort of grasslands. It's this real lovely vibrancy. And then you've got, the terroir, and, the conversations at the time were like, "You guys, this, dry rye is gonna be great, people love rye. Botanivore, that's just super approachable, really beautiful work. It's kind of a chameleon. It works in lots of cocktails. This is really fascinating. That terroir gin though, you guys put trees in there, like that people don't like gin because it tastes like trees. So I don't, this. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you sell a couple hundred cases in California. It's a vanity project, and we're distiller owned and operated. Lance and I are the sole owners of St. George Spirits. We make things because we want to make things. We'll figure out, maybe we can sell it. We make a couple cases, or maybe make a couple hundred cases or more. Like that's the second goal. First thing is just to make it and enjoy it and love it, and you got to love the process for it. And so, we make this gin that's inspired by trees, and we're kind of making the argument of people actually don't like gin. It's not that they don't like gin that tastes like trees. They don't like poorly made gin. And there's a way to make gin where it's this less nuanced. The sense of that tree quality in the gin is actually coming, I believe, largely from the juniper, and you can boil juniper in the pot. You're gonna get more of the seed tannins, I think, from the juniper. It gets more resiny. It's this
Mhm.
different character. And it's really like, I actually really like that in its own way. But for us, we wanted to capture this more elegant concept there. So we use a Carter head assembly. So it's a vapor infusion basket on our pot stills. So our
Okay.
1500 liter stills have these vapor infusion baskets. So we can steam ingredients as well as cook ingredients inside the pot itself. And some ingredients are better off being cooked. Citrus peel, star anise, cinnamon, boil away. They're great. Other ingredients need to be steamed that are more delicate. Things like fresh bay laurel from our backyards, that juniper. We can capture this more elegant expression. And what I want to be able to describe with that is even there, like in the terroir gin,
Mhm.
we'll take Saigon cinnamon again as that dusty warm sweetness because we can't distill dirt. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. You've tried. Yeah, don't do it. Um, but you want to get that dusty sun-baked trail, and so to do that, we use that Saigon cinnamon, and then we also take coriander. And coriander is, I would argue, almost the secret ingredient to gin. You know, like angelica root, orris root are pretty common out
Yeah.
there. They're important. Coriander is like it's like the first half of our concept of juniper, of what we perceive as juniper. And coriander has this more floral quality called it's the compound's linalool, but we can take the coriander and we can wok roast that coriander. By wok roasting the coriander, we get we drive off the linalool. So it's like dry roasting the coriander and then we grind that up. So before you do a terroir gin run, it's 30 to 45 minutes of someone's life, just wok roasting coriander for that one still run. Then we grind that up and that goes in the pot. But by doing that, we drive off the more floral part of it and we
Okay.
elevate, we get a better impression of that dusty sweetness and citrus quality that the coriander naturally has because the linalool, that floral part's not there anymore. And so in a terroir gin, like in the Valley gin, I don't want to wok roast the coriander. I want that floral component
Yeah.
to be there. But in the terroir gin, we need to go into that ingredient and we need to modify it by that wok roasting, by that dry roasting. That allows us to get that more heightened dusty sweetness. Now that Saigon cinnamon and wok roasted coriander start to give us that impression of that dusty sun-baked trail. Angelica root and orris root start to give us low forest chaparral qualities in the in the terroir. We can use some citrus for brightness. We can use a touch of fennel seed here just because we've got, wild fennel growing. We're using Doug fir and again, coastal sage kind of starts to cool the palate on that. And we're recreating that sort of that concept and sense memory of a hike in the woods here. Um, that one is certainly is, kind of iconically what St. George is best known for. If I can venture your, and I'm just going to keep monologuing here, like some sort of supervillain.
We're okay with that, and I'm sure our listeners are too.
Yeah.
That's
That's why they're here. That's why we're all
so,
here.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's the what's the Smartless podcast? Dear listener, um, um, uh, the spirit I would say is a story for me that's personal is our Nola coffee liqueur. And the Nola coffee liqueur, we're a California distillery. We make a New Orleans style coffee liqueur. Again, if I'm like a business guy or a sales guy, this is pretty fucking stupid, guys. What are you doing? It's that we're already there's no elevator pitch here. Story's already too complex. Um, but I met my wife Julia in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
And I had Cafe Du Monde coffee in New Orleans, and I came back and said, Lance, I'm gonna make a coffee liqueur. He's like, great, we love coffee. What are you thinking? I'm like, I'm gonna make a chicory coffee. He goes, Dave, chicory coffee sucks. It's an insult to good coffee. Like it goes back to the Napoleonic age. It's what you get chicory when you can't afford coffee or it's not available. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, no, you don't understand. It's really good. And there's this girl, and he's like, fine, show me. And so I went to Cost Plus in Jack London Square, and I bought this orange tin of Cafe Du Monde chicory coffee. Went back to my apartment in Oakland by myself, and I made chicory coffee, and I tasted it, and I said, hate when Lance is right. This is not super good. Like a month later, I went back to New Orleans, and I saw this girl again, and I had chicory coffee in New Orleans again. I had that my aha moment was sort of, it's not the liquid in my cup right now. It's not this. It's the air I'm breathing. It's the person I'm with. It's all of these other things that I'm bringing to the table. And now this experience is awesome. Like it's so good. So then it's going back to coming back to California and starting to learn more about chicory and learn like anything else. Terroir counts, the way you treat it. How's it grown? Like eventually find a chicory that's French roasted. It's like fig and black pepper and its aromatic qualities, bring it in, and I show it to Lance, and he goes, "Oh, that's beautiful. What is that?" And I'm like, "This is chicory." By the way, it costs more than most coffee does, but this is chicory. He's like, "Oh, that's great, but what coffee do you use now? Because to do this, you need to make sure 1 plus 1 equals 3." Same concept for botanicals in a gin, same concept for the reason to blend any 2 barrels of whiskey together. 1 plus 1 equals 3. That's what I go back to, and that's what Lance kind of brings up, and so then it's about in that case, it was about finding the right coffee variety that would be the sort of, counterpoint to that chicory, and so working with talented friends in the coffee world, learn about coffee and eventually settled on Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee beans. They're dry roast. They're a dry process, so that means that the flesh of the fruit's still present there while the bean's drying, or a touch of the fruit, the flesh is still present. What that happens though is you end up with these great like little micro fermentations, and you get like
Mm.
that's where you get blueberry from. That's where you get like there's some raspberry and some peach and some floral tones. If you do like a more of a wet process, then you get a much cleaner style of coffee that would be a little more citrus, and it would be a very different kind of set of characteristics. And so Ethiopian Yirgacheffe beans, mostly dark roasted with some medium and light roasts, French roasted chicory root, organic cane sugar, non-GMO corn vodka is just a white canvas
Okay.
there. It's like we make paint colors, and I hope we're good painters. But I need a white canvas to paint on, and then also some Madagascar vanilla beans allow us to give a sensation of sweetness in the palate without using so much sugar that the coffee liqueur that Nola become. I don't want. I think a lot of times liqueurs in general, coffee liqueurs in particular, can be very syrupy and cloying,
Yeah.
and it's great in a cocktail, but sipped neat, you're like, oh, this is it's a little intense. It's like
Yeah.
sipping soy sauce,
Yeah.
and there's a piece here of like, this needs to be beautiful in a glass, neat on its own. And it needs to have a concentration so that it will work in a white Russian, that it'll work in a cocktail as well. And those Madagascar vanilla beans allow us to give a little bit of that sensation of sweetness in the mid palate and back palate so that we can use sugar, but minimize how much sugar we're using so that it's balanced. I don't, it's like coffee liqueur. Like, is coffee known for being really sweet or bitter? Like, I want actually that bitterness to come
Right.
through. I want some of that steak and black pepper and this blueberry notes to all come through and be part of what's there. And it goes back to, I want to capture a sense memory. It's a personal, story for me. And it's an important moment in my life. I was lucky enough to convince Julia to move to California, marry me, and be the mother of my 2 children. It was like the longest con in the world.
And that got to be her favorite spirit that you made, right?
Comically, I will say that I think Julia's favorite thing that's ever come out of St. George Spirits is something that we don't sell anywhere, because we're geeks, because we love process.
Yeah.
Um, Lance has made soy sauce and like long, long, years long fermentation of kind of soy sauce, like old school kind of process. And at one point she tasted that and she was like, "I think that's my favorite thing that's ever come out of St. George." I was like, "Cool, all right, perfect." Get back to the drawing board. So hope to work on something else now.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. Well, this is probably my favorite gin that I have ever tasted. This is fantastic. I love it. Just everything about it. It's really artfully done. Once again, yeah, this is making me want to try some nice cocktails for the summer with
Yeah.
it. And I mean, honestly, most gins, I'm not looking forward to tasting them neat. This one is fantastic, neat, just how it is, standalone. Um,
Thank you so much.
yeah, I think it's just so artfully balanced. You guys knocked this one out of the park.
If you have a chance, if you've ever had a Vesper, I say this in the best way possible. It's like well, we call it like a martini with training wheels because it's like 3 parts gin, 1 part vodka. You could use a citrus vodka, maybe California citrus vodka. I don't know, but you could use use vodka. And then also like a half part of Lillet, so kind of like an aperitif kind of wine, but it's a really, it's a stirred cocktail, it's served up. I gotta tell you that it's a monstrously good drink, and the Valley Gin just sings in that space. It's one of those things where I didn't at one point in my life, I didn't like Guinness. I had to learn to like Guinness.
Right.
Martinis were not something that I always enjoyed. I had to learn to like martinis, and the Vesper was my gateway drug to the world of martinis. Now I'm a fan. But it's the Vespers are really pretty, and to this day, like, even I like martinis, but, like, I'll order a Vesper still.
Yeah, cool. I can see this. going really well in like a French 75 or something like that. That would play excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good call out.
And now, before we get into our last pour here, I have to ask you. I mean, we're talking to St. George here. My first introduction to the distillery is with the Baller American Single Malt. Um, I was gifted it because someone thought the label was really cool, and so they gave me the bottle, not really knowing anything about what was inside. And that was my first ever American Single Malt. And
Oh,
yeah, it
that's
was
awesome.
yeah,
That's so cool.
it was very cool. I mean, and you guys have been doing that one for a while now, right?
Yeah, our baller. Hey, look at that. That's right here.
Hey, and there's that
Nice.
label. That's the new label. I think I still have the old label.
That's the new version. Yeah, I've actually listened to that. I listened to your podcast with when you tasted the old one. I was thinking like, oh, that's the old label.
Wow.
That old label is beautiful. I've got I actually did some prints of that old label, so we could do it
Very
as a
cool.
artwork.
Oh, cool.
We did it as a like our staff holiday present that year.
That's awesome.
But yeah, the baller came about because we have friends who have a ramen shop in Oakland,
Huh?
and we're drinking hibiki and Hakushu highballs. You've got these beautiful noodly miso pork belly bowls of ramen. Our sodium levels are through the roof, and there's this there's this piece of it. I think it was part of it's jealousy because it's kind of like, man, the table's perfect. I love everything here, and we've done nothing to contribute to the table. Like, there's this real. Do you guys cook? You bake?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We make. There's this. The best thing in life is when you have a meal with your family who are like friends, and your friends who are like family, and everyone's together. The only thing that's better than that is when you've actually made that meal for them,
Yeah.
and you're kind of enjoying everyone else's enjoyment because you've done something to help make the people you love happy. And I think at ramen shop, I mean, my wife Julia worked at ramen shop at one time. Lance's son Franklin, he worked at ramen shop at one time. These are extended family, and we're having these great meals there. And it's like we've done nothing to contribute to this table. And our lot series single malt, what Lance really set out to make in the mid '90s. Lance and Yard worked on, and with uh, that single malt is one of my favorite things in the whole universe. But it doesn't belong in an eyeball. It doesn't belong as a whiskey to be paired with food. Really, cocktails and food pairings, they're that's a really tricky thing to pull off. There's some lovely expressions of it, but it's like beer and wine, though that's food pairing and that's awesome. Cocktails and food pairings get real tricky.
Mhm.
And the highball, it's a very elevated concept for effectively like a whiskey and soda
Mhm.
is at its essence almost like a deconstructed beer. It's like a deconstructed pilsner because you're taking a wash of beer and you're
Right.
distilling that. And then what are you doing in a highball? Like, well, we're now just basically re-diluting that back down. We're adding back that carbonation. There's probably some salt there, so you get some bitterness from that. Like, there's like something where like there's sort of like this. You're basically deconstructing a beer and putting that back together. So suddenly the highball is this really, really beautiful sort of cocktail pairing kind of concept for this rich bowl of miso pork belly ramen or that experience. And Lance and I, yeah, we met. We're talking from meals there at ramen shop, and went back to the distillery, and we're always doing lots of different. We've got a lab space, so I've got a 10-liter still and a 30-liter still in the lab, also made by Arnold Holstein. So these are full copper, all the bells and whistles. These are from the same company. I will not tell you that and anyone will tell you the same thing. Like they're from the exact same company. Every dynamic should be the same, but effectively everything by size is always it changes in the still pot. So like you do like R&D in a recipe on the lab scale, and then you take it out to production. I've got like a charcoal sketch of what works and doesn't work, but you don't have a one-to-one sort of build process at that point.
Mhm.
You have to sort of reinvent the wheel out on a larger scale. And but we also we've got an amazing relationship with Sierra Nevada. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Sierra Nevada. They're actually pretty big in Chico. It might be a thing there.
Oh, are they here in Chico?
I don't care. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very recent. It's very recent that they're in Chico. There are um, so folks at Sierra Nevada are some of my favorite human beings in the entire world, and this goes from the top down. This goes from Ken and Brian and Sierra Grossman are but like through different departments at Sierra Nevada, there's a lot of amazing human beings who love and respect the work that they do there and really are doing amazing, top-notch, inspiring work for Lance and me and the entire team at St. George. The people at Sierra Nevada, we would get calls from them in the past, even from like Steve Dressler, their master brewer for many years. And Steve would reach out and say something like, "Hey, Dave, I got a whoopsie beer. We basically the mill was, we're making, it's pale ale or we're doing celebration. The mill basically messed up, and so we don't actually like. I think we know roughly what the mash bill went in. How much crystal malt went into this one, but I don't actually have that precise calculation. And Sierra Nevada, their excellence house stature is inspiring for us at St. George. A lot of breweries would say, well, it's one mash. We're going to marry all these,
Mm.
mashes to these, the beer together.
Mhm.
It doesn't really matter. Like it's a 0.01%
No.
difference. Screw it. Doesn't matter. Sierra Nevada is doesn't do that. They look at it and say, if it's not absolutely to our spec and standard, it doesn't go out. And so it's going to go into our waste stream, or we'll call up the fools at St. George and be like, hey guys, I know you're always into weird stuff. Like, do you guys want to distill some beer? You want to distill like this is, got this, we made a little too much of this, or like here's this something where it's a little bit off.
Yeah.
Um, can we, you want to do it? And it's like, yeah, I'll get a truck up there tomorrow. That's now 3,000 gallons of wash. And for St. George, over 30 years, we have all this opportunity to do research and development, to try out different techniques, to try different barrel aging, to try out these different mash bills and to explore that space. And we happen to have one mash bill that was really lean. It was two row pale barley and some Munich malt from that work with Sierra. And it was something where it's like, ooh, that light style of like, it's a lighter style of whiskey, like, it's a very austere style. Like,
Mhm.
our Lot series has a really is sort of these deep roast dark styles of malts to it. But this Munich malt's like number 3 on your toaster. It's just, like, warm without being rich, and you'd like that with two-row pale, mostly used American oak, a little bit of French oak, and then we make our own shochu in-house. Then we make our own ume shu in-house, so that's California garden ume fruit, and then if you've ever had plum, wine,
Mhm.
it's a terrible translation, but it's effectively plum wine. We make in-house to then finish our baller whiskey casks, and the idea there is simply to say, like, we tried to make something that was like our own California homage to what we love about this austere balancing act that we really enjoy in Japanese whiskey.
Mm.
And Japanese whiskey has gone on to do amazingly beautiful. It's iconic in of itself now.
Yeah.
But Japanese whiskey was originally inspired by Scotch whiskey,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
this lovely thing that they've sort of and they've sort of had their own concept and made their own. And I think that that sense of law, that balance in Japanese whiskey is so important. And so this lighter touch, more elegant style of whiskey is something that we made baller as like, this is sort of a concept of like, this is for the shop Highball at our friend's ramen shop. And it started out as a single cask there and eventually started developing into this thing where it's like, now people are going to the ramen shop for the shop highball and the bowls of ramen, and now other people want baller whiskey, so it can be like, okay, let's start making more of it, and it grows from basically goes from like 50 cases to 100 cases to 300 cases to 500 to 1,000 cases to 3,000 cases here, like kind of, and so we're growing that program.
Yeah.
At no time are we like rushing. I'm not going to rush aging. Like I'm not going to, we're not playing music to any barrels at St. George Spirits. No disrespect to anyone who's, that's part of their thing and what they're doing. But like one of my favorite things about being a distiller, about being a blender is that part of what we do is to actually be patient and to have a sense of time and perspective.
Yeah.
So much of our entire life is spent being forced to deal with things that are on a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah.
It's important now, and if you don't know about it now, don't bother because 20 minutes from now, something else is going to be important. Like being a distiller and blender, being a whiskey blender, you don't think in those terms. You think, for us, I'm thinking, you lay down barrels of whiskey. I may never actually blend that barrel of whiskey. I may not, it's maybe someone I work with now, or it's maybe someone that I've never even met who's
Yeah.
going to have the opportunity to take that further. So you're sort of contributing to a next generation in that space. And that's really meaningful for us. That's really powerful. It's important to us. And I'm more than happy to be patient.
I really like that you touched on that aspect of kind of the long view, and that so much of in our society is just kind of that quick. I mean, we see like AI art on, everyone's advertisements and stuff like that, and I really enjoy that longer perspective, and we can just, as a society, kind of feel that pressure to, "Oh, we just got that email in, let me immediately respond to it." Um, and the part of that long perspective that I enjoy is that things seem to kind of work themselves out in that intermediary space in that long term, and I really appreciate that experience, that perspective, because um, you can rush through things and try to, get something out to market, but it's gonna come through in the product, and, with that long arc, you kinda get more tinkering space, more creative space, let those juices flow. You do go out to the ramen shop, pull down that experience and say, "I'm gonna reflect on this, and how can I," you talk about those sense memories. How can I really incorporate something, you were talking about individual ingredients and what they bring to the table, but how can I really bring the parts together and create something that's a little bit more on the masterpiece side of it, instead of a quick, AI jam or something like that getting pumped out into the space. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I think it's important to us. Like it's again, it's like I want to make things that are meaningful to us, and I hope it resonates and is meaning to other people. If it doesn't, that's okay. But man, if it's like other people, I think I believe will make spirits sometimes, and the idea is like this is for a demographic, and it's based on here's the details, here's how you define a population of people.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make that, and I'm pretty sure that if I tried to make that, I would be really bad at it. Like Lance, I think would tell you the same thing. We make things for ourselves. It needs to be for us, for our friends and family, for our table. If more people want to sit at our table, I welcome you and I want you to sit there. If you don't want to sit at that table, that's fine too. Like don't
Mhm.
that's but we'll make less of it if fewer people want to sit at this table. But this is still our table, and
Mhm.
that's part of the ethos. That's what York set in motion. That's what Lance I think really learned. And to do this, like obviously we make spirits. We make the spirits are packaged in bottles and they go out into the world. If you love the product at the end of the process, cool. But you have to love the process. You have to care about the details. You have to really believe in all of it and really value that process. And that has to give you life. That's the key here. And then the this beautiful liquid being in a bottle at the end of it, that feels really good. But
Yeah.
you gotta like the process is the most important part of this, and you gotta really love the process.
Well,
So, speaking of process, right now we're getting into the Lot 25 American Single Malt Whiskey. And I just love the label on this. There's so much going on, that beautiful dragon, and I mean, kind of across all your labels, you have this really like refined, kind of artwork going on. It's sort of like, I don't know, is there a style name to that, Dave, where it's sort of that, um, kind of almost looks like a money, or kind of an
But
ode?
it's
Yeah.
you're spot on. I mean, you think about money, you think about paper ephemera. You look the idea of money in general. And it's important that we're not making labels that are just like, oh, those are the money guys. That's the labels that look
yeah.
like money. Like that's not going to fly. But what is money? What money represents is something that was very difficult to make. You have different patterns. There's the way the printing, the paper used, all of these pieces and elements. The the idea of money at its core was that this is something that is impossible to replicate. Like it is something that's trustworthy
Yeah.
and it's reliable. And Lance really thoughtfully, in part because he got into letterpress printing and really sort of
Huh.
is this amazing creative, just goes into a deep dive on anything he touches. He doesn't understand the shallow end of a pool, really, just like cannonballs in the deep end.
Yep.
And so we've got a print shop at the distillery to like goof around and do some work, to do creative work on that.
That's super
None of these labels are being printed at the distillery, but you can sort of do like your rough sketches. You can start to get a sense of something. You can work with great designers, and you have a little more understanding of it. And that idea of paper ephemera, of having these patterns and this thing of like, you should trust this. This is not to be replicated. And again, you may find quality here, you may not. I know what I believe is in that bottle,
Yeah.
but no one is going to make this. No one else can. Um, yeah, Lot 25 is a celebration of 25 years of releasing American single malts, and that's only last year that's ratified.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Mm. That
This
is
is
so stinking good, Dave. This I think is just kind of skyrocketing to my favorite American single malt that I think we've tried. There's so much complexity in the glass, even just on the nose. Like when I first poured it up, I was kind of getting a like a bright plum note, and then once I revisited it, more of the malt is kind of coming out, and yeah, so far really enjoying the nose, and gosh, the palate is also kind of doing that juxtaposition as well, between bright kind of sweeter notes, and then you get this really lovely kind of roasted malt chocolatiness that comes in, and I said it earlier, just kind of across all products, the refined element to each one. I can tell that just, you guys put meticulous thought into your process, and you're taking all these different parts and artfully blending them together. Um, so cheers to you on this one. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, but I would also like to hear after you're done with that. Yeah, just kind of the process behind this one and all those different parts that are coming together. Because I know you're the consumer and we're here just looking at the bottle in itself, but I know a lot goes into this one for sure.
I have one question first. Does Dave, the producer, is he sipping on whiskey now or anything also, or is he like totally dry on the side?
Oh no, yeah, he's sipping along with us for
Well,
sure.
he was sipping, but his glass is empty
Oh
already.
yeah, did we hit him with the whiskey here?
It's delicious.
Yeah, he's loving it as well.
Yeah, I taste Pilsner on it. There's just
Yeah.
much to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're loving
That-
it.
That's all I wanted, other Dave. Thank you.
He definitely drinks along with us.
Yep, for sure.
Um, yeah, so a lot of things I can tell you about this. I'm gonna tell you exactly what's in this bottle right now
Mhm.
and the mash bill, and then I'm gonna just give you a little bit of the history of our single malt program.
Sure.
Um, but the lot series is composed of 100% barley. So you got two row pale, and then we've got some 120 level bond crystal malt barley. It's going to be kind of that caramely aromatic to it. Chocolate malt, pretty self-explanatory for what that character is. He called it right out. Black patent malt, that's our classic, port stouter, porter and stout quality there. New category. I'm gonna trademark that. So porter and stout, and then finally Bamberg malt is roasted over beechwood and alderwood and comes from Bamberg, Germany.
Oh,
And Bamberg is a town known for like smoked meats. And they
okay.
have this like smoked ale to go with those smoked meats. So the smoke quality there is more culinary in nature. This is not like campfire. I want you to think about like that roasty bacon kind of ham
Mm.
smoke quality.
Yeah.
That's what that malt is like to me.
Okay.
And so we've got sort of those five roast levels to the malt. Lot 25 has 28 hand selected casks in it. The youngest cask there is 5.5 years old. The oldest single cask is 13.5 years old. Average age works out to about 7 years, give or
Okay.
take.
Yeah.
I like to have that that marriage of like some gravitas of some older, weightier whiskey, and then you balance that against that lightness and that nuance of and the aromatics of a little more something that's got a touch more youth.
Yeah.
As a whiskey ages, it develops character. Certainly, it concentrates. There's all that sort of stuff, but you do lose some of those really expressive aromatics of the barley in that process. If I go back to sort of my thesis at the top of this, like Pear Brandy as an eau de vie distiller, when we're making single malt whiskey, we're eau de vie distillers of barley at that time.
Yeah.
Then you've got these roast levels and this character. Some people will tell you, whiskey, White Dog is terrible, but the whiskey's really good, after a time in barrel. Some people will tell you, the yeast doesn't matter, or like we only use one yeast strain. Some people will tell you that and I know I'm making very much of these generalizations, but I've heard them all over the years. Like,
Yeah.
the yeast and the barley, it's basically just an alcohol substrate. 80 to 90% of the character comes from the barrel. Bullshit. Like, if you're, I'm not saying that you maybe are making a whiskey that is evocative of that, of like but you're missing out on 80 to 90, like you're missing out on so much opportunity
Yeah.
to put your thumb on the scale and to make something with character. People will tell you like, oh, this is it's a whiskey and it's distilled, and the classic is always vodka does this about it. It's been you want to drink it because it's filtered 27 times, or distilled 27 times, filtered through, hitting whiskers and diamond dust. Fuck off. Um, like I can't tell you the last time whiskey should not the compliment for a whiskey should not be smooth. The compliment should not be that it's innocuous, that, "Man, that's really clean, it doesn't bite." When was the last time you had a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or a great meal and you're like, "Man, that's really forgettable. It's innocuous. It doesn't burn on the way down." We make things that, like, have character, work hard to get that character in that glass. We go through and every lot series, we release this once a year in the fall. We go through and taste every single cask in the house that's eligible for lot series. Then we take copious notes on the aromatics and the palate, and we start to build up an expression for what we want to share that year. And we have some ideas that we bring to the table where we want to lean into certain cask types or finishes or concept. And truthfully, like, the barrels tell us what we're going to release
Yeah.
that year. The barrels will tell us, "Hey, you might be really into port or sherry right now. The sherry casks aren't there this year. Like,
Yeah.
that's one of them's great, but the other ones are not pulling their weight yet." And going back to this idea of like long-term thinking, as we grow up, as we mature, as we age, like as we get older, we don't always get better. We have these peaks and valleys.
Mhm.
And in whiskey, we love to have this idea that older whiskey is inherently better. It's more valuable. If you're actually in this world, you know that that is not true.
Right.
Like, there's older whiskeys that are absolute artwork and beautiful. And there's older whiskeys that are just like, you basically missed the mark. It's really old. And now it's kind of like, it's just like, you missed the peak on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really have a firm belief in like, what this is about is actually capturing a barrel on the peak, not in the valley. And do you want to, as you taste it, this barrel is really beautiful. Man, it could be more beautiful in a couple of years. It may start to fall down again, and then there's going to be another peak down the road. Is that more important down the road? And if you think about the blending program this long term, or is this the moment? This, I think, is the moment for this particular barrel. Okay, let's pull that out. Now let's do small blends. Let's try to figure out what comes together, how these sort of stack up together, how this all works. Um, and a lot of my process with the whiskey, I've got an amazing team of people at St. George Spirits. The production team works really hard. We do all individual samples. We taste things at proof. It's a lot of time and energy and labor of love. The production team, people on that on I've got we've 5 to 6 people right now on the team, and they're ranging from, there's a person on there who's been there for a few months, and there's people like Chris Jordan's been there at St. George for 17 years. James has been there for 16 years. There's folks, Eric and Maya, like really good human beings who care about what we all make together, and we all contribute to the process. And as we taste, and we taste through things, and we taste with Lance, and I have a great friend named Anthony who has been an educator and whiskey collector, spirits collector, and teacher for, mm, geez, going back more than a decade now, well over a decade, call it like I mean, I've known Anthony for probably close to 20 years now. And we've tasted, literally thousands of spirits together over the years. And he's helped to, he's tasted whiskeys. He's collaborated with us on some of the single malt releases over the years and D&E, our breaking and entering series. And um, everyone has had some part and some input and taken a role in this. But all of us are stewards for something that Lance set in motion with Jorg back in 1996 when Lance joined the distillery. And eventually they settled on the mash bill. Lance, you'll appreciate this. Lance at that time, started in 1996, wanted to make whiskey. York says, "Yeah, we can make whiskey, but I've got these pears coming in, so we gotta make some pear brandy first." And Lance's like, "Oh yeah, of course, we're making pear brandy, and learn it." And York, I can't find, I know that we can't really order, you can't buy port barrels. Like there's no market for port barrels coming into America in the 90s. But, I found, out in Livermore, out in like, kind of, distant Bay Area, like Livermore, there's a lot of Portuguese grape varietals that grow really well out there. I mean, you Touriga Nacional, and I want to make my own port, so I can make my own port casks. So then we have port casks for the whiskey program. And you're just like, "That's great, kid. Also, I got these Montmorency cherries. We got to make some kirsch. I got these Miko raspberries." And y- Lance showed up as a kid with a love for single malt whiskey, and he wanted to make a truly original expression of American single malt. And we're not the first people to make American single malt, but your taught Lance how to love the process of being a distiller and making a spirit, not just to love that end product.
Right.
And that idea of originality is really important to us, where there's other folks who are making really beautiful whiskeys and they're evocative, as we made our baller whiskey, that's evocative, that's our homage to what we love about Japanese whiskey. There are folks who make American single malts that are evocative of Scotch, and there's sort of an homage to what they love about Scotch whiskey. And that's awesome. I love them for that. For this was Lance's sort of dream of making something that's truly an American original. This is something that doesn't exist out in the world. You can, to not be replicated. So he really leaned heavily into those roast levels. As a brewer, he knew that those roast levels and the barley really counted for a lot. It's not just an ethanol substrate or a barrel. Like he could actually shape the character of that whiskey. And then some used American oak. We can utilize some used French oak as well, and then we'll also do some shaving and retoasting of some French oak barrels in there. In lot 25, we had I wanna just making sure I'm not, misspeaking. I wanted to bring up my notes on this, because at this point, my memory is not to be trusted. Um, there's a lot of alcohol floating around between those brain cells. So, so the American oak, it's all used casks, but they both bourbon as well as some rye. That rye though is generally a very light 51% rye grade. So it's basically rye just on the other side of being bourbon. And we love rye at St. George, but a little bit lighter style here. And then also I've got some apple brandy cask, some agricole rum cask, port cask, and finally California style Sauterne cask. And for those who don't know, Sauterne style wine relies on botrytis, which is a fungus that grows on the grapes. These grapes are hand picked. It's very, very difficult to make Sauterne style wine and the true expression of it. The best in the world can't guarantee that they're going to make it every year. Like the conditions have to be perfect. And we've got a great relationship with some folks who make some beautiful California style Sauterne wine. We bring those barrels in and finish some of this whiskey in those Sauterne style wine casks as well, which I think helps to give some of that weight and depth and earthiness, so that it's not something that's, it shouldn't be sweet. It should, everything here should be, truly balanced. I want to make sure this is beautiful and neat on a rock, or neat, but it also needs to live and breathe on a rock. Um, as you as you taste this, thinking about Lance at the beginning and the outset of this, he was excited to make a whiskey. And in the year 2000, when they first released American Single Malt, he was going out to Whiskey Fest, and folks didn't care about an American Single Malt, a 3-year-old. It's an unknown. Our first approval from the federal government on our lot series St. George whiskey defines it as a bourbon. We had to write back to the federal government and say, "By the way, guys, it's not a bourbon. Here, I know what a bourbon is in your rags. Please look again at what we wrote you. It's all barley. It's a single malt. Like it's not that." And you have to. A lot of people didn't understand even today. "Oh, it's a Scotch." No, it's not a Scotch either. Here's the details
Yeah.
of why that matters. But ultimately, like, is this unique? Is it expressive? Is it something that's got a thumbprint to it? Love it or hate it, like, I want you to recognize this as something that's really important to us. To celebrate the 25th anniversary here, the last tidbit I'll throw in here, the very first barrel of St. George single malt was laid down in November of 1996. So when Lance and York finally settled on that mash bill, and they did that with their friends at Sierra Nevada. Lance at that point, he still will tell you a story. He left a message that he called Sierra Nevada, and Sierra Nevada. Think about the '90s here. Sierra Nevada are just like they're still gods, but like they're this is like you know Lance is a young brewer, young distiller in the Bay Area. Leaves a message, at the Sierra Nevada, and he gets a call back, and it's Ken Grossman calling him back, and he's like already like I'm talking to Ken Grossman, like oh he's just stoked. And, Ken was incredibly generous, incredibly sweet, said, "Yeah, St. George at that point, that we don't have brewing equipment, so, and why try to invest in that? It's pretty expensive. Let's talk to really, really talented brewers, and here's the mash bill, and bounce some stuff around with Sierra Nevada and taste the true things and, even ABVs and all that, and just, we're part of that experience of just developing something and, just sharing that moment in time." And so, we still to this day work with Sierra Nevada for brewing our mash bill on this.
That's awesome.
It's something where it's really important. They're good friends, really good human beings. And so to help celebrate that though, and we've done this a few times, but the very first barrel of St. George single malt laid down in November of 1997, SMO1. That we pulled out a barrel 10, 12 years ago. It doesn't need more oak. It's not technically aging once it goes to steel, but it doesn't need more oak. I'd rather press pause on this beautiful pink color. And then now we have this detail that we can paint in at different times. And so in lot 25 here, there is just a little expression of SMO1, a kiss of that
That's cool.
that comes into play as a part of this release.
I love that you have the roots in the glass here too, and kind of have the whole arc there of St. George. Gosh, I have so many different questions. First off, I want to touch in to that relationship with Sierra Nevada that you're talking about here. Um, I think I've seen you guys do an actual collaboration product, right, with some of the beer maybe finished in your guys' barrels there. Is that right?
Um, it's even more just looking to see if I have a bottle of that easily available, and I don't. I must have I drank it,
Yeah.
and I know I've got that. I know I got it out in the garage. But over the years, we've got those. As I said before, we got Sierra Nevada would have beers and washes and things that were they made a little too much, or it wasn't something up to their spec, and they're not going to just blend it away. They are just ruthless with their quality control, and so they'd reach out and say, "Hey guys, you want some beer here?" And so we would bring various things in over the years. One of my favorite beers that came out of Sierra Nevada many years ago was the Ruthless Rye IPA. Just being an absolute sucker for rye in general and rye whiskeys. If I in the world of bourbon, I know it's blasphemy, but wheated bourbons are not my jam. Rye is a small grain and bourbon. Now we're talking. And
Yeah.
ryes in general are my absolutely. I'm in. I want character. I want that texture. I want that chewiness. But the Ruthless Rye IPA was just an awesome, really beautiful expression from Sierra Nevada, and they had some to share and send down to us, and so we distilled it, and then we aged it, and eventually that kind of developed into a sort of a co-branded project. Sierra Nevada are really good stewards and caretakers. They care about the people in Chico
Yeah.
and certainly in their communities in general, both out at Mills River and around town. I'm always really impressed with who they are as people, first and foremost, and as well as artists. And we sort of came up with this project of the Ruthless Rye whiskey. It's not technically a whiskey. It's called Ruthless. So I can't call it a rye because it's not technically a rye based on the quantity of rye grain. So it's like so on its type and class, it's something ridiculous like uh
Whiskey other.
with it's like whiskey blended with grain, spirit, and hops or something like that. It's It's the kind of thing that really it's a great category. Look for that shelf.
Yeah.
Exactly. Um, but it's been a fun collaborative project, and so because it's a fully hopped beer, and it's something where with time those hops have really settled down. They go from being almost over the top to just now being this like subtexture and this resiny floral tropical counterpoint. Um, mostly new oaks and a touch of used oak in the Ruthless project, and then we did those as like one day releases at the distillery. Had our friends from Sierra Nevada come down, signing bottles, and we were donating. 50% of all proceeds would go from the first release a couple years back, went to support folks in Butte County, and then the second release we did, I guess was more than about a year and a half ago now, was that other release. And that one we had 50% of all proceeds went to charity, but that basically part of it went to the Butte County Food Bank, I believe, and then the other part went to our local Alameda County Food Bank.
Good stuff.
Just there's lots of good folks in our community who are doing great work,
Yeah.
and it's the kind of thing where we're not making so much of that it needs to go out in distribution.
Yeah.
Distributors don't necessarily want more spirits to sell. Like it can be, and with a co-branded project, if it isn't going out to a Sierra Nevada distributor or a St. George distributor, basically one of us is going to make our folks in our sphere upset.
Yeah.
But if we do this as just sort of a project together, direct sales situation, and then because we're not going out to distribution, there's frankly there's extra cash
Right.
from those sales. Let's take that and let's actually do some good in the community. Like no one, these are smaller projects. Like this is not about keeping the lights on. This is actually just about trying to, do some, share that and try to help folks out who are helping others out.
That's awesome.
So, and the folks at Sierra Nevada have always been just awesome to work with, good human beings. So I can't say enough nice things about them.
Love that. Love that. Well, one last question for you, Dave, before we finalize it out here. Being
Abraham Lincoln,
being
Velociraptor.
Ooh, that's a good one.
7.
That's the
42?
42. Yes. Yes.
Um, being a bourbon guy, and I feel like, products like this Lot 25 are kind of like slowly making me a convert to American Single Malt Whiskey. And I've kind of tried to understand the perspective because, there certainly are people out there that, say, get that bourbon out of my face. I want myself an American Single Malt Whiskey. So, I mean, the simplified question for you, Dave, is why not bourbon? And I kind of want to suspect that the perspective that I've seen for the people that are American single malt folks are um, really more, like corn is a cheap grain. And, really the artisanship of working with the barley um, and what goes into the bottle. I think that drives a lot of people. So I'm curious, is that kind of your same perspective? Is that St. George's perspective of we're going to leave bourbon for the other folks and we're just going to focus on really putting excellence in the glass here?
Um, it's a great question. Lance is better equipped to answer that than I am because, he was at the outside of this. But, to start off, he was a brewer and brewers work mostly, barley is what you work with. It's, you might have some, you know, corn, rice, rye, grain. You're like, there's some adjunct grains in there sometimes, but they're not the heart of it.
Yeah.
And Lance really saw that, again, go back to the 90s, like distilleries in Scotland. So maybe backtrack for a second. In the 90s, Lance is gifted a bottle of Lagavulin by a friend. And it's the first bottle of whiskey that Lance ever has in his life that wasn't just technical drinking. It wasn't, it was something where like, there's a story here.
Yeah.
What is this? What is this gold? So he goes and learns about it and starts to connect the dots between being a brewer. And at that time in the 90s, certainly, and going on, you look back we talk about peaks and valleys. You have this Scotch history where distillery managers, they're not graded on the quality of the whiskey coming out of their shops. Like they make whiskey, and you could, with respect to distilling in Scotland, there's a limitation to that in some ways because, in my opinion, because you have a distillery producing a spirit, it will spend 96 hours there ferment still. Maybe it's barreled or maybe it's just trucked right out of there. Then it goes out to Glasgow where it's barreled, or it's barreled at the shop and at the distillery, and then it goes to Glasgow. That distiller never ever sees that whiskey again. And that distillery is not being graded on necessarily the quality of spirit coming out of the shop so much as what is the volume of proof gallons, or if they're working in proof liters, what is the volume? What's your efficiency? At that point, they're using six-row barley. I think some of that's shifted over the years now to some more two-row, but still, like, this is about efficiency. This is a commercial process, and there are beautiful things that come out of that commercial process. Go to Kentucky,
Yeah.
massive amounts of bourbon being made. It's a commercial process by and large, and yet I will be the first one to say that there are awesome bourbons that come out of those shops. There's beautiful work that comes out of those places, but it's a very large scale process. And I think when Lance was inspired, by a bottle of Lagavulin, when he was excited as a brewer and what he could do, he saw barley as, this is his own original concept of like, I don't want to make Lagavulin. I want to make the next Lagavulin for America that no one has. Like, I don't even know what that's going to be yet.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, get inspired and then use that as like a jumping board and run off in your own direction rather than trying to emulate this thing that you fell in love with. And that was the impetus for it. If they had done a bottle of bourbon, maybe it would have been that inspired him. It might have been a different story. It could have been that that was the thing that he was chasing down at that point.
I gotcha.
But, it really came down to, I think, where that inspiration was and what set him off running.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Dave, do you have any final thoughts here?
Well, yeah, my question for you is where can our listeners and viewers find you guys at St. George?
So please look up our social medias. So we're on, I think Instagram is probably the best way to see us. Our website, stgeorgespirits.com. That's stgeorgespirits.com. Our newsletter is through that. We're in Alameda, California, so that's in the Bay Area. We're a ferry ride over from San Francisco as well as Oakland. And we've got an amazing tasting room and an amazing hospitality crew of folks who are just doing, I'm so proud of the work that they're doing as we host guests both in the industry and us, and just and folks just wandering in randomly. We've got an amazing tasting room. We do education, we do tours. So certainly you can come find us there. And then the last aspect is obviously your local spirits retailers, local bars. Ask for St. George, and if you have any trouble finding us, we have we have a spirits locator on our website,
Yeah.
so you can try to find spirits close to you. And if it really comes down to it, I believe this is still active, but there is I believe it's called Find Me Booze at stgeorgespirits.com, which is an email address that someone will answer, and you're like saying, "This is where I am. I'm having trouble, finding you," and we'll try to do our best to help figure out where you can find something. We really believe in like, I want you to be able to reach out to us and speak to a human being and, be able to like, I hope we can help you. I don't know that we can help you. Maybe that we don't, we're available in, oh man, it's probably give or take 42 markets in America, probably a dozen to 15 international markets. But we're a small independent house, and a lot of talented people, from sales, operations, bottling, office administrative. Like everyone wears their heart on their sleeves, and everyone really loves it and cares about it. And we're all just trying to do our best and put something real out in the world.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to have you on today, Dave. You're a true legend in the game for sure. And I don't want to hear
That's a sad statement about legends.
I don't want to hear any different. No, I really appreciate it, and it's cool that you already have that Chico connection. We'll have to get out there to Alameda, and if you're ever in Chico, for sure, we'd love to connect with you again.
Mhm.
I'm truly impressed with the lineup today, and you guys have a bunch of other spirits out there too that I would love to explore as well. So I'm just over the moon today to spend the time with you, Dave, and I hope our listeners are too. Let's pour up a little bit of a final cheers here, because I really want to commemorate, this episode. You know, it was great meeting you at American Craft Spirits Association. We were very lucky to have it in Sacramento in our backyard. So great to meet you there. And I'm glad we could continue the connection on. Cheers to St. George.
Cheers.